So, when does the rapture actually happen? Let's be honest, it's one of the biggest, most debated questions in all of biblical prophecy. Today, we're not just going to talk about it, we're going to investigate it. We're going to act like detectives, piecing together clues to see if we can finally crack the case on its timing. Okay, so we know that a 7-year period of intense trial for the earth, often called the tribulation, is prophesied. The Bible's pretty clear about that. But what's not so clear is where the church, the entire body of believers, is during all of this. Are they still down here on earth going through it all, or are they somewhere else? That's the central mystery we're diving into today.
So here's the timeline we're working with. You've got this solid 7-year block of time, the tribulation. And we know for a fact that Christ's final physical return to earth happens after it. The big question mark, the variable in the equation, is the rapture. Where does it fit? Does it kick things off before the 7 years begin? Does it happen somewhere in the middle, or is it at the very end?
To solve any puzzle, you need evidence, right? Well, the source we're looking at points to 4 major clues, all hidden in plain sight within the book of Revelation. And when you start to piece them together, a really compelling picture starts to form. So, let's open up the case file and get to our first clue. Our very first clue is all about focus. It's about where the camera, so to speak, is pointing during the tribulation. The biblical narrative seems to zoom in on one group in particular. And who that group is, and more importantly, who it isn't, is, well, it's super revealing.
So in Revelation chapter 12, we read about this epic conflict. The source we're pulling from interprets the dragon as Satan. But the real key to unlocking this passage is figuring out who the woman is. The argument is that this figure represents the nation of Israel, not the church, which means the central conflict we're reading about here is a direct attack on the nation of Israel.
And check this out, the timing for all this is incredibly specific. Revelation gives us 3 different ways of saying the exact same thing. You've got 42 months, 1,260 days, and this interesting phrase, a time, times, and a half a time. You do the math on any of them, and they all come out to exactly 3.5 years. This places this intense focus on Israel, smack dab in the middle of that 7-year tribulation.
So what's our first clue telling us? Well, if the main event, the main story happening on earth during the tribulation, is all about Israel, it begs the question, hey, where's the church? The argument here is that this massive shift in focus strongly implies that the church is no longer the main character on the planet, suggesting it's already been taken off the scene.
All right, let's move on to our second clue. This one centers on a very specific, very unique group of people who show up during this chaotic period.
In Revelation chapter 14, we're given this exact number, 144,000, no more, no less. And the text is very clear they are from the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are described as being redeemed from the earth.
But here's the word that changes everything. The Bible calls them first fruits. That's a really powerful farming term. The first fruits weren't the whole harvest. They were the very first best portion that you'd bring in, and it was basically a guarantee that a much, much larger harvest was on its way.
So the logic here is actually pretty simple. If this group, the 144,000, are the first fruits, meaning the first part of the harvest gathered during the tribulation, it logically implies that the main harvest, the church, had to have already been gathered before the tribulation even got started. It just makes sense. You can't have the first part of a harvest if the main part hasn't already been dealt with.
Okay, clue number 3. This one feels kind of like a major change in job descriptions on a cosmic level. It's all about who's in charge of spreading the gospel message here on Earth.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Over here on the left, you've got right now the church age, where believers, people like you and me, have the job of sharing the good news. But then, on the right, during the tribulation period, Revelation 14 says God literally assigns this mission to angels flying through the sky, a total handover. This, of course, leads to a pretty obvious question. Why the big change in personnel? Why would God hand over the church's #1 primary mission to a team of angels? Well, the proposed answer is as simple as it is profound. This job transfer happens for one reason. The original employees, the church, are no longer on site. They've clocked out. Their absence from Earth makes it necessary for a new team to step in and continue the work. All right, let's get to our fourth and final clue. This one shifts the scene entirely.
away from the chaos on earth to a massive party up in heaven. And it's the timing of this celebration that might just be the master key to this whole prophetic puzzle.
Right near the very end of that 7-year tribulation, Revelation 19 paints this incredible picture of an event in heaven, the marriage supper of the Lamb. We're talking about a cosmic wedding ceremony of epic proportions.
So let's break this down, because the symbolism here is absolutely central to the whole argument. In this view, the Lamb is, of course, Christ, and his bride is the church. Now look at the two most important details. The wedding takes place in heaven, and it happens right as the 7-year tribulation on earth is wrapping up.
And when you put it all on a timeline like this, it just clicks. For the bride, the church, to be up in heaven and made ready for her own wedding at the end of the 7 years, well, she had to have gotten there before that 7-year period ever started. The wedding is the grand finale of a period the bride has spent in heaven, not suffering on earth.
And so that's where our investigation leads. When you take all 4 clues together, the laser focus on Israel, the first fruits harvest, the angelic messengers taking over, and the timing of that heavenly wedding, they all seem to be pointing to the exact same conclusion. It's a compelling case built clue by clue that leaves you with one final thought. If the bride has to be ready for the wedding at the end, when else could she have possibly arrived but at the very beginning?